Wireless networks use frequencies in one of two bands primarily. Those are the 2.4 gigahertz band and the 5 gigahertz band. And when you're doing your configuration on your access points, you may be in different configuration modes, one for 2.4 gigahertz and one for 5 gigahertz. So I wanted you to be aware that these are the two ranges that exist, but also be aware that we're not talking about all of the 5 gigahertz traffic operating at exactly 5 gigahertz. There's a range of frequencies around 5 gigahertz. And there's a range of frequencies around 2.4 gigahertz. It's not just that specific frequency. First, let's consider the 2.4 gigahertz band. Now, technically, we have 14 different channels. And for channels 1 through 13, we have 5 megahertz between each channel. The exception is between channels 13 and 14, there's 12 megahertz. By the way, channel 14, you will probably never use it. If you use it, then two things are probably true. Number one, you're in Japan, and number two, you're using the very old IEEE 802.11b standard. So you'll probably not be running into channel 14. And we want to have nearby access points on different channels so they don't interfere with one another. We call that having non-overlapping channels. And a misconception is if I put my access point on channel 1, you can put your access point on channel 2 to avoid that overlap. Well, that's not the way it works. When we say we want non-overlapping channels, we have to realize that when we say I'm using channel 1 or channel 5 or whatever, I'm actually centered on that channel. But the actual frequency range that I'm using spans 22 megahertz. So if I say I'm using channel 1, that's going to extend a little bit above channel 3. So we could not even have channels 1 and 3 active at one time without some interference. In fact, in order to maximize our non-overlapping channels in the 2.4 gigahertz range, we want to have 5 channels of separation. So it's common to use channels 1, 6, and 11. Notice that these channels being spanned by the center channel of 1, 6, and 11, they're not overlapping. They're not interfering with one another. Now we could, if we were using .11b in Japan, we could have another channel of 14 that would not overlap, but it's unlikely we're going to have that. I just mentioned that for completion. So in a design, how do I have multiple access points to expand my coverage area while not overlapping? Well, we just want to make sure that channel 1 is only bordered by channel 6 and 11, and channel 6 is only bordered by 1 and 11 is only bordered by 1 and 6. Think of this honeycomb style design. Let's start with channel 1 in the middle. We say that is a cell of coverage. Well, we do not want any neighboring cells of coverage to be using channel 1 to avoid that overlap. So maybe I put a cell using channel 6 above, a cell using channel 11 below, and then between channels 1 and 6, we'll put channel 11. So there's no overlap between either 1 or 6. And between 1 and 11, we'll put channel 6 there. So notice in this honeycomb style pattern, the channel used by each cell is only bordered by cells using a different channel. And you could continue to expand this honeycomb design indefinitely. But with 2.4 gigahertz, we need to be really careful not to have overlapping channels. The good news with 5 gigahertz is that we have much more elbow room. We have many more channels to select from. In fact, what I normally do is just tell my access point to listen to the radio waves and select the best channel. And here is a screenshot of a wireless network analyzer I had running on my PC, and it's showing the wireless environment. It's showing what wireless networks are using what channels. And you might think these channels seem to be spanning quite a range. Well, if you notice in the lower right-hand corner, it says we have a channel width of 80 megahertz. What we've done there to provide more throughput is we took 4 of the 20 megahertz channels and we logically bonded them together. It's called channel bonding. And as a result, instead of having a 20 megahertz channel, I've got an 80 megahertz channel, and that's going to support more simultaneous communication. But to wrap up, we said that we have 2 primary frequency bands for wireless networks, the 2.4 gig range and the 5 gig range. And when we do our channel selection with the 2.4 gig range, we want to have 5 channels of separation. And we commonly use channels 1, 6, and 11, but we don't have to be quite so cautious with the 5 gigahertz channels because there are so many of them.